Hey everyone, welcome to Northminster Online. Whether you're watching the modern or traditional worship services, we are happy that you're joining us this weekend. We have our 2021 edition of our annual meeting coming up, our congregational annual meeting on January 31st at 11:45, and we're going to meet over Zoom. So that link is going to be on our website, northminsterchurch.org, on the Northminster app, and on our Facebook community group. We're also going to be emailing that out to everyone who's in our email system. So be on the lookout for that link and join us on January 31st. Mark your calendars at 11:45. Today we are continuing in our sermon series, Reorienting, and Jan is going to be talking about the importance of having rest stops in our lives. Let's get started.
it's another cold winter morning, and as I sit here looking out my windows, I remember the smell of hot chocolate. You see, every weekend I would go to my Grandma Spence's and I would have a cup of hot chocolate with her. That wonderful smell of Ovaltine and her signature molasses cookies filled my days. And also, she would tell me the Bible stories because my dad had colored in with colored pencil a Bible story coloring book. It would just be amazing, and my grandmother would tell me the stories, and I could look at the pictures and see why he drew it. And my grandmother would sing hymn upon hymn. Hi, I'm Jan Dillaman. I work with Greg here as a parish associate. I just come and help out visiting people and seeing how they are. I wanted to give you a little bit of backup of who I am, because why is this special? Well, I'm special in the sense that I'm adopted by a dad with a birth mother. You see, my dad died when I was 8 months old. That was Grandma Spence's son. He died at the age of 21. His sister died at the age of 24 of heart. And that left only one child. So it's always amazing to me that my grandmother would spend the time with me telling the stories of her children and yet singing hymns. I never saw her being sad. I just saw her always just at rest and at peace. She never let me see all the busy work she did while I was sleeping. I was adopted when I was 3 years old. It was special because how many people do you know that would take a child in a marriage and make her his own and yet honor her birth parents? Not only honor her birth parents, but also include that name on her birth certificate. That was so important to me. So each weekend, since I was a wee little child, my mom and dad would send me away from my brother and sister to be with my Grandma Spence, so I could remember my dad, Lawrence, and get to know the Spence family. It never occurred to me that it was unusual to have 3 grandparents. You know, every Sunday we went to Grandma's house. We started out with Grandma Smith, my mom's mother. There was always donuts and hot chocolate there. Something about hot chocolate. Then we'd go to Grandma Spence's, and the cousins would come over, and we'd have a chicken dinner. Not much, just a time of dinner and games, and just little family talk. And then we'd go to the Fonger family, my adoptive family, and we'd have dinner there. And we, again, would meet with all the cousins and the brothers and sisters that were local. They lived out on a farm, so I always enjoyed that because there was lots of animals, lots of gardens, lots of things to explore and get into. And every once in a while, like once a month, we'd go to the neighbor's house on Sunday nights. We would go, and there were 3 other sets of families, and we'd gather, and we'd have dinner together, we'd play games together. That was weekends for me. I looked forward to those weekends. It was such a wonderful time. Today we want to talk about what we do on weekends. Most importantly, what we do on the Sabbath. You see, we're in the middle of a sermon series. We've been looking at our new year and trying to find new ways of being, new ways of looking at things like we do every year. You know, we set our weight goals, we set our exercise goals, but we also set our spiritual goals. And Sabbath is the way we do that. And it's a special time each and every week that we can set aside just to do that. So today I want us to consider Sabbath by 3 things. First, I want us to consider how God is working when we're not. Because sometimes we want to know that. Secondly, I want us just to say, what is the Sabbath? We hear that word, especially the church, but the world doesn't use that word ever, except for sabbatical leaves. So what is that? And finally, how do we walk together? How do we get to that point where we can take charge and not control? For that is what Sabbath's all about. In the sermon series we've been talking about, it's easy to get lost. I should know, I get lost all the time. I get lost at Spring Grove Cemetery every time I go there. I never can find my way out. I can usually find my way in. I only pray that there's all those lines that tell me how to get there. And that's how we go through life, isn't it? Following those lines. And then we talked about Jesus being our true north. It's important that we know where we're going, following a destination, following that line, following that map. That helps us to see and know that at least we're attempting to go in the right direction. And then finally, last week, we talked about walking together. Walking is a rhythm. Runners have to set a pace. They can speed up their pace, they can slow down their pace. And usually when we walk at a pace, whether it's slow or fast. It's rare that we change our pace as we walk or even talk. I've been accused of having to slow down, which I'm trying very hard to do right now, because I'm from Michigan and we talk really, really fast. So that's why I have learned, slow your pace, take your time, don't rush through. You see, I'm a musician. I was a music major, got a degree in music education and taught in the public schools for a little bit. It's important that we have a measure of life, just like measures in music. We measure our days, we measure our weeks, we measure our years, and we measure our time. But it's important in music. The most important part is the rest. You see, a rest is when you can take a breath, whether you're a singer or an instrumentalist. You get to take a breath when there's a rest. And so you look forward to that rest point because we all need to take a breath. We need to move together rather than scattering. So that's why we go in measures. We look forward to that rhythm, and we look forward to rest. But that gets us back to that question. How do we do this when everything about our rhythm is so different? COVID has changed so many routines. The simple routine of going to my neighbor's house for a cup of coffee doesn't exist anymore. I homeschool my 7-year-old grandchild. When I say homeschool, I really mean remote learning. I think I'm learning more than he is because he's very good on the computer, but I am not. And it's so different because we feel so isolated, and we intentionally do that to stay safe from the virus. And what about all the turmoil in our world? How we don't get together like we used to do. When I make telephone calls to different people that I know, a lot of times they'll say, I just want to get back to normal. I just need it to go back to the routine. We want to be together. We want to see our extended families. We want to visit our friends, our neighbors, and we want to gather as a church together. And yet, at the taping of this, Hamilton County is in the purple zone, which means our virus is very, very infectious. And so we are more cautious, and many things are closing down. But how do we reorient to a different normal? Because we all like routine, don't we? I know when you get up in the morning, we all have a set morning routine. So we get up, brush our teeth, brush our hair, get ready for work, get ready for church. Now, I can come to church in my pajamas if I want. You can't see me. though I try not to. But I can come as I am. And that's kind of different. I don't have to leave any place. I'm just stuck at home. I think it's really difficult to look at 2021 and say, well, how can I make changes for the new year? I don't know what it's going to bring. When will I get my vaccine? When will this virus let me not have to wear a mask? When will it be safe for me to go to church together with everyone there and gather in large groups? It's important that we consider, well, this is our normal, and yet, is it really? What do we do about worship and Sabbath? How do we take this rest just to make it stop for a moment and let us take a breath? Well, Jesus understood that reality. He was talking with his disciples in Matthew 11, 28 through 30. He says, "Come unto me, all you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." Do we trust that God is working when we want to just get back to that normal? Do we trust that we can yoke with God? A yoke is something you put where the two animals walk together at the same time. Can we walk with Jesus at the same time? And what do we do when we get slow? Will he keep us going? A lot of people will say, well, you have to find a balance in your life. And you hear that a lot. You need more recreation time. You need to balance out work and play. Well, that's a Buddhist idea, and it's really not what Jesus is talking at all about in the Sabbath. It's not about balance. It's about restoration. It's about restoring our spirit. It's about getting that breath. And it's about focusing on God. And how do we do that? Well, Jesus was a good Jew, and he practiced within the synagogue and knew the Sabbath laws. As a matter of fact, right after the verses I just read, comes a story about Jesus breaking the Sabbath rules and the Pharisees trying to trap him. Go ahead and take a look at it in Matthew 12, 1 through 14. I won't take the time here, but the gist of it is, how do we know when we're breaking the rules? How do we know how to do Sabbath? How do we know our true north? And how do we stay yoked with him? Well, the first thing they learn is memory. You see, memory is the most important skill that we have that most animals do not have. And for the Jews, the Sabbath day is the day of memory. They remember the Creator and the creation. They contemplate spiritual things. They find family time. They are mentioned more than sacrifices. This is the Sabbath. The most important part of it is that story of salvation. The story of moving from God's people through the Exodus into salvation, into freedom, into becoming the children of God. It's an active verb. A lot of us want to think that it's idleness. But it isn't. It's not stopping our work. It's just changing where we are putting our focus for one day. And it's not something we do to please God. God knows what we need, what's going to make us whole and restore our spirit and renew our lives. And feeling that we're not responsible just for ourselves, but also the way our actions and words affect the Sabbath of others. Live where people are watching. That's what was happening with Jesus. They were watching. People do watch us. But we don't need to be afraid because we have the capacity to enjoy and celebrate the gifts of God. And that's what Sabbath is all about. Remembering the gifts of God and celebrating that with one another. And it's gathering together intentionally, whether with your family, with neighbors, with a small group, and in congregations. We congregate, we gather together, we move to that place. So how do we find that connection? How do we make it that way? Well, first, we want to make sure that we understand that Jesus is our true north, and he tells us, I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Did you catch the S on the end of souls? It's not just my soul, it's for all of us. He gives all of us that rest while we're walking beside him. It does mean that we go with Jesus. It does mean that we can take our weaknesses and he'll carry us. We find out that's through the word grace. And grace takes us to where we want to be normal again. In Isaiah 40, verse 4 and 5, it says, every valley shall be raised up, every mountain be made low. The rough ground shall become level, and the rugged places a plain. And the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all the people will see it together. The prophet's reminding people of that way of salvation. And back in Exodus, when Moses was telling the people right before they began the journey, he said, don't be afraid, stand firm. You will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Our past, fortunately, we don't have to see again. We can learn from our mistakes. We can do that, but we don't get a do-over. We don't freeze in place. And finally, that brings me to the last point of, so what can I do for Sabbath anyway? The world's out of control, and yet I'm yoked to Jesus. I'm not gathering together, and yet you offer me Sabbath and rest and restoration. The world is crazy. I feel out of control. Friends, we can't control anything. The only thing we can do is take charge of who we link ourselves to, who we put that yoke on with. And for Sabbath, we're invited to put the yoke of Jesus, our true north, around us and to contemplate all the gifts and blessings, leaving our work and world behind for one day. It's not a time to discuss. It's our employments and all those things. It's a time for us to just enjoy and relax. It's a festive day. It's the most important day in the Jewish calendar. So Sabbath, it's a time where we trust that God's working when we're not. Sabbath acknowledges that we do get lost during the week, but that grace, that story of salvation, brings us back and brings us peace and the ability to enjoy an abundant life. Calvin said that Sabbath is the binding Christians in service in the gratitude of grace. Indeed, we notice again, it's a binding. It's not bound. It's a binding. It's that action verb. We are to do things with our families. Jesus knows what will make us whole, restore our spirit, and renew our lives. Jesus is our true north. We don't take control, but we can take charge. We walk in a rhythm, a tempo, a pace. The measures of our life are like the measures in music, and remember those rests. Because we do need those rests. It's like a layover in an airport. You can either be working on your laptop and miss everything going on around you, or you can take a moment, take a breath, be with the people that God has placed in your presence, and enjoy life. Let us pray. Oh God, we know that in this time it's hard for us to understand how to stop and rest because we feel that's all we do. Sometimes we feel like we have to find ways to fill our time during the week. And others, we are so overworked and overwhelmed. Lord, you know what we need. So we ask that you help us learn to put Sabbath as a priority and know that our Sabbath time affects others. We pray for those who are essential workers that cannot have a Sabbath. Their Sabbath has to look totally different than mine. But Lord, you know their needs, and we ask that you help us find ways to let them know that they can restore their spirits with us. Most gracious God, we do bring up our nation. We are changing leadership, and we are tired, and we want rest. And yet rest requires us to bind together and serve in the gratitude of grace with one another. Help us find that so that as we leave our Sabbaths, we can walk into our work with joy and abundant life. Amen.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for worshiping with us this morning. If you would like to continue to support the ministry and missions of Northminster Church, head over to northminsterchurch.org/give. And if you'd like to stay up to date with everything we have going on here, make sure you download the Northminster app, bookmark northminsterchurch.org, and like Northminster Church on Facebook. Have a great rest of your weekend.